going to call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Councilor Thorman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Councilor Frazier.
There you go.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Are there any announcements from members of council? No. It's kind of sad. Like, we're almost at a year where we've just kind of had no announcements. Always used to have Councilor Thorburn would start with museum stuff or something related to the Legion, but it's just been quiet. I will say that we are about at the 1-year anniversary of the passing of Mr. Sander. That popped up in my Facebook memories the other day. Yeah, I don't know what to I don't know what to say. I just I personally think of this gentleman quite often. I mean, every time I pass the school playground, I think of that. Just a remarkable story, and if you are new to the community or you don't remember the story of Mr. Sander, I would love to share it, not tonight, but or encourage you to look it up. This is a gentleman who only spent a couple of years in Bridgewater and yet considers Bridgewater, until the date of his passing, considered this his hometown, and named the first building that he built the Bridgewater. And it was his pride and joy. And as an immigrant in the late 60s from India to a small town in Nova Scotia at a time where that might not have been as welcoming or as accepting, this community embraced him, and the rest is history. So I just find it an incredible story, an incredible man. So I was thinking of his family and wish them all the best. And I know lots of people are very appreciative to the Sander family in this community. We don't have any public delegations. We have the minutes from December 14th, regular council meeting, December 21st special council meeting, and the January 11th regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions there? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Deputy Mayor Tanner, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. Further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And we're right down to planning. Our first item is special commercial C8 zone amendments. This is the first reading. And I see we have Ms. Childs, looks like she's prepping to come down to the podium. I love that you're walking while you are setting up the...
I probably shouldn't, but we're good. Oh, is this going to stay out? Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is the first reading for the amendments to the special commercial zone. And the amendments being proposed are for the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw, and they're looking to permit additional commercial uses by development agreement in the C8 zone. So there's 3 planning process types, and different uses are permitted in different zones by either as of right, site plan, or development agreement. And these amendments would be permitting additional uses by development agreement. And the reason for these amendments is to provide greater flexibility to C8 zone properties, because they currently have very limited permitted uses. So there's no single property for these amendments. It's for the entire zone. So there are 18 of them, and they're just shown in black kind of throughout town. They vary in size, they have different surrounding zoning and surrounding uses. They're on a variety of streets with varying street classifications, and they have a range of current uses. They're all kind of unique from each other. The C8 zone consists of properties where commercial uses exist in residential areas. Commercial uses were established at these properties before land use zoning was created in the 70s, so they were permitted to continue in the existing building through this zone, but controls were placed to reduce any conflict to these residential areas. The town's policy says that if these commercial uses are discontinued, council has the ability to rezone the properties to what they are designated as in policy. And what that means is that every property in town falls into a zone, but also into a larger designation, which is what council envisions for that property in the future. And the majority of these 18 C8 zone properties are designated as residential. So the intent of the policy is to overall transition them to residential, but staff feel that permitting more uses by development agreement that are non-residential would help property owners because many of the buildings aren't suitable for residential, and a low-impact commercial business may be suitable in many of these areas. And staff also believe that it's supported in policy because the uses are no more disruptive or conflicting than the existing uses that are permitted in this zone, and general town policy supports a mix of compatible uses. So these are the current permitted uses. As of right, there can be single unit or 2 unit dwellings, and then each property has a site-specific commercial use that really varies from leather workshop to dressmaking to like larger automotive shops. There are certain ones permitted with conditions, so home-based businesses, residential conversions up to 3 units, and then by development agreement, an expansion of a building or use, multi-unit residential up to 4 units per acre, collective residential up to 4 units per acre, and inns in pre-1975 buildings, and then the ones that are the uses permitted with conditions and by development agreement do have associated policies with them. So this list is the proposed permitted uses by development agreement in this zone. So I won't read them all, but I'll point out a few of them. Some of them are straightforward. Other ones like craft workshop means a building or a part of a building where craft products are produced and offered for sale, or where craft instruction may be offered. Something like household repair services, which may sound slightly more intrusive, is a building or part thereof used for the repair of household articles. So that's like radio, television, appliances, and it doesn't include any industrial repair services or automobile repair services. And there's also a proposed limit to retail sales as well. They would have to be in specific areas, so specific properties. So there's a reason that these uses were chosen as proposed uses. The list is largely based off what was permitted by development agreement in the 1997 planning documents, so staff has used that as a base. In 2014, this list did go away because there is intent to do away with the C8 zone and revert the properties to residential, so the uses were really limited. However, over the years, staff have realized this doesn't really make sense for each of the C8 properties, and it can prevent property owners from finding adaptive reuse of the existing buildings. The uses were reviewed to be sure that they were considered less impactful commercial uses that would be suitable for residential contexts. They're also similar to the uses permitted in the restricted commercial zone, which is a commercial zone, not residential, but it's located on corridors in town like Dufferin Street, where it abuts largely residential areas. So it provides a good idea of compatible uses and practices to make those uses more compatible. So some examples for that are that there are some increased setbacks in that zone to reduce negative impacts. It limits the uses that are permitted, and it limits the size of building additions. The uses are also similar to what is permitted as home-based businesses. So all of the uses except dog grooming, galleries, and retail are permitted as home-based businesses. And that supports the idea that these uses are compatible with residential areas. However, home-based businesses are more restricted though, and these limitations include restricting the size of the businesses to no more than 25% of the dwelling's gross floor area, and that's only up to a maximum of 350 square feet. And it also requires with home-based businesses that the owner has to live in the dwelling. So there's a lot more rules with that. So permitting the uses in the C8 zone by development agreement provides the ability to have additional commercial uses with the same limitations as those that currently are permitted at those site-specific uses for each property that are already permitted in the C8 zone. So, as I said, these would be permitted by development agreement, and this is for a few reasons. There's a variety of properties that make up the C8 zone. You can see that they're all over town, and they have a variety of surrounding zones and uses, and not all of these properties would actually suit all of the proposed additional uses. As mentioned, a similar list of uses existed in the 1997 documents, and those were by development agreement as well. And by going through a development agreement, there's an increased ability to make sure that the proposed uses would fit in with the adjacent properties. Almost all the 18 properties are designated as residential on the future land use map of the municipal planning strategy, and they're not commercial, so amendments can't go against policy. So although these amendments would permit more commercial uses on these property, they would be permitted with more control than if they were just permitted as of right. And in the future, if these amendments are passed and a property owner requests a change of use to something on the proposed list, a full development agreement process would be required, and that would determine if the proposed use is in fact suitable on that very specific property. So staff thoroughly reviewed this to see what option would make the most sense. An initial inquiry came about from folks at 287 King Street, and the current permitted use, it's one of the C8 zone properties, the current permitted use is shoe repairs and shoe leather sales, and there's interest in changing the use to what would be considered in the land use bylaw a craft workshop. So staff explored options for this specific property, but none of them were suitable. So I'm just going to go over a few of the options that we looked at just to give some context. So we looked at the option to rezone the property, that specific property, to residential commercial, or C6, because that zone permits more commercial uses in residential areas, but does limit the commercial uses. But this wasn't suitable because a redesignation of the property would be necessary. And also policy says that a land use bylaw amendment can only be considered if the size of the property meets the zoning standards, and for this one it didn't. So that option wasn't suitable. Another option staff looked at was amending the land use bylaw to permit craft workshops as of right in this property. So the specific use that each property has, this one would change to craft workshop. However, it's not practice to do site-specific amendments, and even if a craft workshop were to be permitted now and later a different compatible use was sought by the property owner, we'd be back in this same spot again. Staff also looked at the option to rezone all C8 zone properties, but the current policy designation of these properties are mostly residential, so rezoning to one of the permitted residential zones in those designations wouldn't permit any commercial uses. And although a redesignation and a rezoning can happen at the same time, like I said, there's 18 properties and they're all unique, so that was out of scope for this application, and it's recommended that that be left to the full review of the planning documents. So 2 public meetings were held to discuss the possible amendments. The first one was for the property owners of the C8 zone properties. That was on November 18th. 3 people attended, and the main topics were understanding the list of the proposed uses and understanding the timeline of a development agreement. A second meeting was held for the public with all property owners within 100 feet of the C8 properties notified, and 3 people attended that as well. And the main topics were the impact to adjacent properties, that a development agreement would be a burden to the property owners if they wanted to change uses, and the idea to exclude residential expansions from the existing expansion criteria for the zone. So I'll talk about that in a second. So staff reviewed the MPS policy to determine the amendments were consistent. And of particular importance to this application were minimizing conflicts between land uses, compatibility with infrastructure, promoting diverse and convenient neighborhoods, supporting a range of transportation options, and preserving, enhancing, and protecting the natural environment. The implementation policies were also reviewed, including IM6, which is always done for land use bylaw amendments and development agreements. And with IM6, that's usually a very detailed analysis done by engineering and planning, but it's pretty site specific, so it was a bit more of a general one. So since these proposed uses would be through development agreement, if someone wanted to do one of those uses, IM6 would be reviewed in detail for that specific use and that specific site. So the actual proposed amendments include a few different things. It would add that list of proposed uses to the land use bylaw and the municipal planning strategy. It would also change policy CDA 5A so that any new building or expansion of a building can add up to 40% of the gross floor area of the existing building, no matter the surrounding zoning. And that's a little bit confusing, but it's being changed because right now, a building can only be expanded up to 20% of the gross floor area unless at least 75% of the abutting zoning is non-residential. In that case, it could be up to 40%. So it's pretty complicated, and it doesn't actually apply to any of the properties because of rezonings that have happened in the past. So that would be changed, that it could be up to 40% no matter what. And then in addition to this, any residential additions are being proposed to be as of right rather than by development agreement, as long as they fit within the zone standards that are outlined in the land use bylaw. And this is the thing that came up in the public meeting. And it makes sense because it's supposed to be uses that are that wouldn't conflict with residential. So, of course, residential fits within that, and that's the intent of the zoning, is to transfer over to a little bit more of residential. And I just wanted to mention, too, that a second part to the amendments was initially discussed when reports came into council earlier, and that was that rezoning of the C8 properties that no longer have a commercial use. So staff was going to bring back a report at a later date to continue with that part of the application, but may include it as part of the larger planning document review rather than a separate process, because they just ended up kind of being two very different things. So it's recommended that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give first consideration to the amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw as contained in Appendix A for the special commercial zone, and the Town Council schedule a public hearing during the regularly scheduled meeting on February 22nd, 2021.
Thank you. Questions from council?
Just one, if this goes through, then the changes on this affects all the 18 properties listed as Zone 8. So we don't have to go back a second, or third, or fourth time, so it makes sense.
And then if, at any of those properties, if they wanted to do any of those permitted uses, they would come specifically for that.
Yeah.
Cool. My question is, I think I already know the answer. It has to go through a DA process. But if the proposed change of use is very similar yet different to the current use, is there no mechanism or policy we can put in place to say, if it becomes this, then it's obviously that it's not going to impact the surrounding property. So if the place on King Street, for example, is currently a leather shop and they're going to go to a dressmaking shop, for example, there's no increase in the customer flow, there's no increase in the building footprint, there's not much changes other than what they make inside. Yeah. They still have to go through what is a very cumbersome process. There's no mechanism to make that a little simpler. And
that's what we looked at. This is what we landed on because we looked at all of those options, because the proposed, their intent or their hope is to go to a craft workshop from Leatherworks, which similarly to that wouldn't change a lot of it, but we just looked at all of the options and there was just nothing that was possible. Unfortunately for that, like I said, site specific is not really a good practice. There's various reasons because of policy that we couldn't necessarily change those specific uses. There's possibility in the development agreement process to not be overly specific, so I wouldn't be able to comment on any specific examples, but the use does have to be pretty explicit in a development agreement. But if it was craft workshop and they were crafting two different things, they could potentially use the same development agreement depending on how it was worded and what the substantive parts to that development agreement were. And just based on what the zone is just tricky. It was originally in place to minimize any more commercial happening, so it's really written to reduce that and turn it over to residential, so there was just not a lot that we could do with that with the zone as it is right now. So.
Other questions from council? It's obviously first reading, so it's going to come back. So if you have questions, if the public has questions, reach out to us and we'll, through the CAO, get those questions to staff answered. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Thorburn, thank you.
I would move that Town Council for Bridgewater give first consideration to the amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaws contained in Appendix A of document 20-158B for the special commercial C8 zone, and schedule a public hearing during the regular scheduled meeting on February the 22nd, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to reports and recommendations. North Parkade deck repair options. And this will be exciting. See Mr. Davidson with a spring in his step.
Good evening.
You get all the fun ones.
Well, yeah, we could say that. Last we spoke was back in November with regards to the non-award of the tender for the deck repairs and waterproofing. And at the same time, council asked staff to come back to review the options and report. So we did discuss with our consultant, ARC Engineering, and to put it simply, I guess, the available options can be described as repairing the concrete deck to keep it safe and usable, repairing the existing deck and painting, repairing the existing deck and waterproofing, replacing the entire concrete deck, or either in segments or all at once. I did put some cost estimates in the implication section of the report. It is recommended by the consultant that until an option is selected, that we hold off doing any cedar railing repairs or the power options to make sure that work is not damaged by any of the work that we would do on the deck itself. And also would allow for options. If we did the entire deck at once or in segments, we may be able to run the conduit through in a better way than what it would be after the effect, aftermarket or after the effect. So just outside of repairing the deck to keep it safe, of course, I wrote a paragraph on each. The repairing the concrete deck and painting would be the lowest capital investment that achieves all the objectives, which are protection of the asset, the user's needs, and the desire to make it more aesthetically pleasing. However, it does come with additional maintenance that will be required to maintain the deteriorating concrete surface and the painted surface as well. So I did describe what the base operation and maintenance budgets would be each year for the next 10 years in the implication section, financial implication section. But over and above that would be $25,000 would be needed to maintain the painted surface. And simply I took an estimate of how much surface area would be affected, scraped or removed from snow plowing operations or what have you, and about 15%, you can imagine that's not a lot of space, damaged surface, with an average cost per square foot equals about $25,000, unfortunately. So similarly with concrete deck and waterproofing, all the objectives would be met, but of course the waterproofing itself is more expensive than a painted surface, almost double. So the operations budget would have to be increased to $50,000 for that option. The replacing of the entire concrete deck in one single year is valued at $1.3 million in 2020 dollars. Certainly not feasible in the next couple fiscal years. So there is the option of replacing them in segments, which we've already done the middle portion already, and using that as an estimate for future years. We did about 13% already in 2018-19 at a cost of $312,000. So staff estimated a 4-year program. So that $1.3 million in 1 year would be about $500,000 over each year for 4 years. Certainly, again, while more feasible at over $500,000 per year, it's still a large investment. Staff's opinion would be prior to completing any significant repairs to the North Parkade and doing the Phase 3 downtown plan, it should be determined if the parkade is integral to the future success of the downtown. Staff suggests there's a needs assessment be done in the parkade as one of the main objectives of the downtown parking study. So the financial section, I just kind of made it easy to read in terms of what the estimated cost would be for the option 1, 2, or 3. So you can see option 1 may be about $265,000 for the deck repair and painting. The deck repair and waterproofing for this year would be about $325,000, and the concrete deck replacement in its entirety is about $1.3 million or $515,000 per year. Below, I also give a description of the previous capital budgets, as well as based on the condition assessment of the maintenance program. And that's mainly to point out that regardless of the type of surface that we put down, there are some basic needs, financial needs for operation and maintenance over the next 10 years. And with this, certainly the parkade is well rooted in council endorsed plans, previous capital and operation plans, as well as making King Street a vibrant and thriving place. Staff have listed, maybe not an exhaustive list, but nonetheless a number of options, and we are recommending number 1, complete the parking study in the next fiscal year and complete any required North Parkade improvements in subsequent fiscal years, beginning in 2022 and 23. Thank you.
Questions from council on that? Deputy Mayor.
Matt, refresh my memory, what's it cost to take it down completely?
Cost to
What was
take
it,
it down,
1.8?
actually.
Didn't we
I
have an
believe we
estimate?
said that around 300,000, yes.
Oh, 3, okay.
Knew you were going to ask that question.
Did you?
I mean, I support doing the parking study. I think we need to do a parking study. My concern is that we see the work that's just been completed on 517 King. There's going to be residential units there. We know the old Bank of Montreal building, the proposal that has come and gone before council is to put a whole bunch of 19 residential units on top of that building. There's going to be commercial space there. There's a commercial tenant going into 517 King now. You've got right next to there a new restaurant that's been open for a few months. There's a pending sale just across from the old bridge and a building there. So there's a lot of things happening on King Street, but we know that it takes some time, right? It's a big ship to turn, but it's turning. So my concern is, and maybe the answer is they already build this into the parking study. If you do a parking study today, that's not reflective of King Street 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. So how do you account for or make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot by saying you only need X number of parking spaces based on what we see in 2021, and then in 2023 realize there's 400 more cars going up and down King Street every day requiring parking, and you've done something based on incorrect data. Do they account for that, or?
I would think that certainly as in previous proposals that we've done, is that they would look at the existing needs and they'd look at the future needs, and we provide them through, as part of the RFP process, any documents related to what we feel is going to be potential developments now or future, and they would have to make some level of or do some level of crystal balling on what our needs will be, so that will be part of the RFP.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Councilor McDonald.
You mentioned a needs assessment.
Mm.
What is the difference between a needs assessment and a parking study?
It's just like my understanding is that it would be looking at the downtown as a whole, but then the needs assessment for specifically the North Parkade itself. So I think it's part of it. I don't know if there's any better words there that you can have, but I guess I use them, I intermix them. So a needs study or a parking study. Either way, you're reviewing the parking both for now and in the future.
So if we were to do a parking study, from that information, would you expect that staff could do a needs assessment on the parkade from that information?
From the RFP, yes, we should be. Yeah.
Other questions? Councilor Caldwell.
I have 2 questions, if I may.
Yep.
Maybe you can clarify the math on option 3. I have 1.3 million, or
Right.
500,000 a year over 4 years.
Only for the fact that I pointed out that in the original assessment, the parkade, if you could remember, review back, the consultant said in 2018-19 it was 1.2 million to start off for a full deck replacement in 1 year. Now he's suggesting a couple years later it's 1.3. What I looked at is that's my benchmark. And divide that by 4 if need be. But my example or my cost figures are based on us already doing a segment ourselves and that cost per square foot. So that's what I've broken down is using our own experience on what it would be if you did it in 4 different segments themselves. So the 1.3 doesn't equate to 2 million. It's just the fact that I'm using the example of in 2018-19 of $12,000. For 13% to be done. So taking the other 87% at that cost per square foot over 4 years.
Okay. The other question is, can you just explain the value of the waterproofing, paying extra for the waterproofing? What are we getting? What's the value?
Based on, to be quite honest, I personally look at it as glorified paint job, a better one. It may last longer. It may be more durable. To look at the cost per square foot for painting was anywhere from $400 to $650, and the cost per square foot for waterproofing was $950 to $14 depending on the product. Of course, it's more durable, so it may hold up to wear better, but in essence, you're getting a color change.
Fancy. Deputy Mayor.
More of a question, maybe procedurally. Is the second half of this motion required? Complete any required North Parkade improvements in subsequent fiscal years? Like, is there a reason that's there to bind council to do something, or?
Or you could,
Can we
if council
cut
wasn't
it?
prepared to commit to completing, you could defer decision
Okay,
with respects to.
okay.
Yeah, you could drop that off if you wanted.
Just asking.
Other questions? Councilor Paget?
Yes, just, it makes logical sense, I think, to do the parking study before we, will we have that back in time for budget deliberations this year, do you think? Or it's not going to happen for this fiscal?
No,
and-
it's
Yeah,
budget, right now, I think tonight you'll be talking about the
Yeah,
proposed
that's
capital
right.
plan, so it'll be, but now staff can certainly make it a priority to get it done as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
But I can't see it being done any earlier than, depending on when council passes budget,
Yeah.
June or July of this year.
Mm. Okay.
So parking study done this year, the work next year.
Yeah.
Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Taylor.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater direct staff to complete the parking study next fiscal year 2021-22.
Seconder, Councilor McDonald, further discussion?
Question?
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Great presentation. Our next item is there for information. It is the building permit report for December 2020 and final numbers for the year. Wow. That's a good year. Despite the challenges of COVID, the value of construction was almost double what it was the previous year. Big apartment building doesn't hurt in those numbers, but the number of building permits I was pleased to see is two less than it was last year, which was also a busy year, in 2018, which was a really busy year. We're almost equal to that, so that's good. Although at the rate we're growing, we also continue to face challenges, which we're going to talk about when we get to our capital budget. So the phrase "growing pains" is definitely what we're feeling in Bridgewater. So it's nice to not be sliding in reverse, but at the same time, it does create some challenges. If there's any questions on those, you can reach out to staff. Oh, Councilor Thorburn.
Yeah, our permits go from January the 1st to December 31st, right? The
Yep.
calendar year?
Yes.
Not the physical year?
Correct.
So do we have any information on where we are in January so far, the 25th of January, as far as compared to last year?
So in our next
Yeah.
February meeting, we'll get to January.
Yeah.
We're always a month
Yeah.
behind.
Okay, I
Yeah.
thought they may have some information tucked away.
So I'm
No.
sure Mr. Hopkins would have that if we needed it, so you can always,
Just wondering.
you're just curious. Want to know.
Absolutely.
Okay. Their next item, 9.3, is tender 20-09E for a 3/4 ton 4x4 pickup truck. Mr. Davis is going to come back and run us through this one.
Hello again. Yeah, so the 2020-21 operating capital budget included the replacement of one of our trucks, specifically the 2010 Ford F-150 or Unit 48, with a 2020 newer 3/4 4x4. We issued tender in December, issuing at least 20 tender packages. We received 3 submissions. Those tenders were reviewed for criteria typical to purchasing a piece of equipment, obviously price, schedule, specifics on the vehicle itself, warranty, fuel economy, etc. We found that there were 3 submissions. Of the 3 submissions, 2 were in budget range, and the attached certificate, tender certification, is there. We are making the recommendation to purchase the 2021 Ford F-250 3/4 ton Super Cab truck, complete with provisional item of a tailgate step from GW Motors Limited for a total price of $50,416, and that includes HST, or $45,718.98 net HST. The budget, the approved budget for the item is $45,000, so we'd be approximately $700 over budget with this purchase.
Any questions on that? Councillor Thorburn?
The truck that we're replacing, is that getting reused somewhere else, or is it being written
This should be
off next year?
surplused.
Huh?
This will be surplused.
Surplus and go in auction next
Yep.
year? Okay.
Replacing a 10-year-old truck, and if I recall, we normally keep our trucks quite a long time. Is 10 years our norm? Or does truck last a little
I
longer?
would say yes, 10 to 12, Mary. Not typically, usually in previous employment, I've replaced them a lot sooner than this, so I think 10 years is a good number to get out of a truck. Just a little specifics on it. It is we have been exceeding the maintenance budget 3 out of the 4 years on it, and the truck comes with approximately 93,000 clicks on it. So not a lot of kilometers, but certainly well used.
No, I always notice that about, like, we keep our trucks a long time, and I know we still have that Escape out back, that hybrid Escape, that's 2008? Yeah. By the way, first hybrid of any municipality in Nova Scotia, but who's bragging? Any other questions?
Do you want a
Someone prepared to
motion?
make a motion? Yes.
I will, your worship. I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and award tender 20-09E, a 2020 or newer 3/4 ton 4x4 super cab truck for the purchase of a 2021 Ford F-250 3/4 ton super cab truck, complete with the provisional item tailgate step $300 plus HST to GW Motors Limited for a total price of $50,000 for $16,000, including 15% HST, $45,718.98, including net HST.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Frazier. Further discussion? Hearing
Question?
none. Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we want to run through the other items, since the budget is a timed item for 7 o'clock? So, or, 'cause we don't really have,
We can. Well, I don't know.
we don't really have any other items other than budget items.
We have an in camp.
So I'm looking for a little bit of direction here from, yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll recess until 7, because for those watching and for new members of council, budget is a timed item, so we do that intentionally, so people know exactly when we're going to talk about budget, so we're as open and transparent as possible. Especially in a post-COVID or pre-COVID world, people would have known at 7 o'clock they can show up, so they don't have to sit through all this excitement until 7 o'clock. But that said, if they tuned into Facebook now, that's great, but if they were expecting us to be talking about it at 7 and we had already started, we might be excluding some people. So we will recess, we'll deal with our in-camera items now, and then we will be back at 7 o'clock. All right, we will begin or restart our meeting, our regular scheduled meeting, after taking a small break. And we are now in the 2021-2022 budget deliberations. Tonight we're going to be starting with the capital budget discussion, some capital pre-approvals. We do have an emergency repair item to talk about and some capital carry forwards. So I will pass this over to, this is our Director of Finance first. This is your first budget with the town. This is such an exciting, we should have had cake. First of all, we'll have cake in April. All right, so I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hopkins to run us through.
Thank you very much. So I kind of have a bit of a presentation, but we'll certainly can have some discussions about how much detail we go into. So I'll have some questions for you at some point. So we do prepare, starting last year, we prepared a 10-year capital budget. Prior to that, we were just showing 5 years. So this information that you have in spreadsheet form, I know is really tiny and hard to read, so we'll stick to the presentation where we can, and we might have to flip over to the spreadsheet with tiny fonts at some point. So I really wanted to focus on the 2021-22 capital budget, but also we're going to talk a little bit about 22-23, because these next 2 years are really substantial capital budget years for us here at the town, and part of that is because we have committed to those 2 years $3.2 million towards the Exit 12A project. So it's $8.4 million. However, we have $3.2 in these next 2 years. As well, we have about $5 million per year in wastewater projects. And so that is a substantial part of the capital budget in those 2 years. We also have our other significant annual projects such as paving and sidewalks and other multi-year projects in those 2 years as well. It's not just those two big categories. What I've also done and provided you with is a little bit more of a breakdown. So this is the 10-year capital budget, and you have the big budget document. But what this shows you is by department or function of the town. So it's taken this exact same 10 years and given you just a little bit of a different view on it. So for the total of the 21-22 capital budget as proposed at this point, we're at $13.6 million. But you can see 5.6 million is wastewater, and you can see, planning and some of those breakdowns between departments, and you can see that for all 10 years. I've given you an alternate one, and this has a little more information, so the font's smaller, so I apologize. But this gives you actually by type of project, and these type of projects are those that are used by the province to categorize our project types. And so this gives you even a greater breakdown, so you can see recreation, parks, wastewater treatment, wastewater collection, transit buses, storm sewer, so much more detail, but still a condensed version of that 10-year capital plan, kind of a 10 years on a page type scenario. So again, still the $13.6 million total, but just a different way of breaking that down. So if we look at the actual budget for the 2021-22 capital budget, there's a couple things that I want to draw your attention to. And this is presented a little bit different this year than in the past, but we actually, the capital projects that we're going to bring as carry forward projects to you later this evening are added to that. And so at the top of the 21-22 capital budget, you will see those items, and under budget year, they're called carry forward. So those are the projects that are in progress that we anticipate won't be finished by March 31st, but that are in most cases started. So we've added that to the capital budget so you can see the full thing, not just what we have, but you can see the carry forwards and the total projects in there. Energize Bridgewater is its own separate line, which is the bulk of the Smart Cities project. So it does show in our capital budget as an annual commitment to that, but we know that's how that's funded. The 12A, Exit 12A of $3.2 million. We have pavement renewal budgeted at $400,000. The North Parkade at $350,000. That was discussed a little bit earlier in your regular council meeting, so that might get pushed out based on the conversation related to the parking study. The water tower commitment of $415,000. wastewater pump station 11, 3.5 million for that year, for a total project cost of 7.1 million, and then the various other projects. So I guess this is kind of where I want your thoughts. I know you've done it differently, different years, but I can go through the 2021-22 capital budget line item by line item if you want, or you can ask questions about specific things or specific projects that are in that budget year. However council would like. We don't want to drag you through line by line if you don't want to, but we're happy, staff are here that might be able to answer any questions you have on specific projects.
So I'm open to what council wants to do, especially we've got 2 new councillors, so I don't want to make assumptions that we're going to necessarily do it the way we've always done it, but maybe the way we've done it in the past is the best way. What are your thoughts? I also don't want to just dictate where it goes. Okay, everybody can't talk at once.
We could, without getting into a whole bunch of detail unless you want to, just reference the item and the amount, and if you have any questions about it, then ask away. Does that sound fair?
Yeah? The advantage to that is that it highlights
The
what
highlights
the item is.
for the public, yeah,
Public hears it.
and for council, and then if you're not, we do have the description, and we have the rationale noted, so why it's there, and how it's funded. So we could try that route, and if you feel like you're not getting enough detail, then you can let us know.
It's good. In the absence of an alternate suggestion, why don't we do that?
Okay, perfect. So we'll start at the top of the list, which is actually our carry forward. So the whole first page is essentially carry forwards. So the asset management planning is a carry forward amount, and the total budget for that is $65,000. The North Parkade repairs, electrical and cedar railings is budgeted at $110,000, although we did hear you discuss that earlier and perhaps deferring that until the parking study is complete. Design the wastewater system upgrades, and that budget is $480,000. Wastewater treatment plant, replace the RBC drive. The budget is $40,000. The wastewater treatment plant RBC shaft replacement program, $250,000. The wastewater treatment plant replace the boiler, $50,000. Energy efficiency upgrades, $100,000. Town-owned decorative lighting, $300,000. Half-ton truck, $45,000. The Wilesbrook Bridge, $30,000, sorry. The radio tower replacement, $295,000. The wastewater treatment plant pump station 10 force main replacement and design, $250,000. The sidewalk plow, the budget for that is $180,000.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Kim. Wilesbrook Bridge, do we get any funding from the province on that?
No, that's all capital out of operating, and so I'm not sure if Larry looks like he would like to comment.
I guess I'll just try and explain that. That's actually the design for the town services that are supported on the bridge.
Okay.
They're replacing the bridge soon.
Councilor Donald.
Just a curiosity question for you, Larry. The sidewalk plow, we're replacing a 1999 sidewalk plow. We do have a spare. How old is the spare?
That would probably be replacing the spare. The other two would be
so
newer.
then the 99
Yes.
would be kept. Okay, as the replacement. Okay.
And are we getting the same kind of style? Both are, like the ones we have now all seem kind of the same. Is there anything different that we're...
There are other options, and through, I guess, the tender or the RFP process, other suppliers would provide other options for us to consider.
I'm just curious to see, I think maybe I've talked to you about this one before. I saw one in Halifax that looked like a tiny little street sweeper. Now, I don't know if in the winter it does anything other than just sit around, but I know we get complaints about garbage in the ditches of the trails and things like that, and I'm curious to know if you could get a sidewalk plow that could double as something that could also pick up garbage. Maybe that doesn't exist, but is that something we could have two purposes for?
It's something we could look at. There may be an attachment for that. It's not one of the multiple attachments that we have for this type of a device, but there may be something now for that machine. We can look into it.
Okay, and I do know we use our sidewalk plows in the summer. We use it for the watering and other things. So it's not just a sidewalk plow. I do recognize that. I'm just curious. Other questions on carry forwards? There's some more carry. Is there another one on the next page?
There's just one more, yeah. The CNR bridge condition assessment at 51,000. And so that is the total amount that was budgeted. However, some percentage of these projects, in a lot of cases, are complete, and you'll see that in the report later, what percentage those are complete, but this is the carrying the total budget forward, because we don't fund it until the project's actually complete. So it looks a little high. It's not actually that high. It's just because we put the whole amount in, because if it's debt financed or it's capital from operating, we don't pay for that until we finish that 100%. Okay? So that ends the carry forward items. So then the items that are on the list for 21-22 are the Energized Bridgewater project at just over $1.2 million, a 3/4 ton truck at $55,000, battery operated tools, spreader, cutter, equipment of $55,000.
Deputy Mayor?
Kim, that one's not classified as a mandatory yes or no. Do we know?
We might not have had that written answer, because this is, that's actually for the fire department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but don't we should know if it's mandatory or
Yeah,
not.
in some cases, we don't have, that was the
We didn't get the
mandatory
answer.
column, we added a little bit later, and so we might have already had their information, but we
Okay.
can certainly go back to the fire department and ask them
Okay.
that question. BMA roof replacement and repair, $50,000. Bridge railing replacement program, $25,000. The Brook Street sewer, $245,000. Brookside Cemetery pave entrances, $10,000. Corrugated culvert replacement program, $10,000. Crosswalk improvement program, $10,000. Energy management program, $164,500. Exit 12A, which we discussed earlier, at $3.2 million. The guardrail replacement program for $10,000. The North Parkade aesthetic improvements of $350,000, again, which may be pending and moved out to future years. Pavement renewal program, $400,000, which is our normal annual spending. Pinecrest subdivision storm sewer, $100,000. Plotter scanner copier for $20,000. 2 police department vehicles, one at $55,000, the other is a purchase or payout of a current lease at $16,500. Pump station number 4 items at $18,000. Pump station number 3, pump room piping replacement, $180,000, and you'll see that on the pre-approval list later.
Yeah, Councilor McDonald, sorry.
Sorry, I'm going back here a little bit.
Mhm.
Brook Street sewer, I noticed that there's option 1 and option 2. The price seems to kind of fall in between those two options. So is that a decide which option later? Sorry, it's way back.
So I think in the text, there's actually an error that 169 should match the 245.
Oh, okay.
So option 1 is the 245. If you want to pave the rest of the street that wouldn't necessarily be disturbed, then it would be the 360,000.
That makes sense. Great, thanks.
You might as well stay there, Larry.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, Katie, you want to- I think we're down to the...
Public Works
Yeah.
garage door access system, $10,000. Public Works garage overhead door replacement, $20,000. The sidewalk improvement program, $90,000. St. Philip Street playground chain link fence, $12,500. Survey equipment?
Councillor Caldwell.
So the amount we spend annually on sidewalk improvement and on the roads, is that a fairly static number from year to year? 400,000 and 90,000, I think? And if so, how do we come up with that number?
It's generally our base number, and in years past, if we've had extra money, like we've had some surpluses in the past, where we have said, okay, I want to say it was 2017 where we went almost $1 million. I'm looking to our communications person. There was one year we had almost $1 million worth of
Doubled it, didn't
The
we?
base was
Didn't we take the
600,000
gas tax
that year. That's
But it
right.
was the other projects that were going on that were infrastructure related that put the value.
It
of
was
all
$1
of
million,
it
yeah.
to $2 million.
So it's not, it's almost like the floor. And then as council debates the budget, if we feel like we need to direct more money to pavement management or sidewalks, then it's got to come from somewhere, but it's certainly just a starting point.
I think Larry's been pretty upfront as well, that it nowhere touches what you need to touch with $400,000. It's about what can you reasonably afford to do.
Yeah.
I think we could probably spend $2 million a year and still be going behind.
Easily.
There was a number that Larry gave us one year that,
Yeah, I think when we looked at trying to, let's say, do work on all streets within a 20-year time frame, it was around 1.2, 1.3 million per year.
and I was going to ask a similar question in terms of sidewalks. So we talk about active transportation, we talk about increasing that value of sidewalks, especially, I believe in a post-COVID world, we've got people that are more active now than they've ever been. They're going to use that infrastructure. We need to do more to get our sidewalks in better shape, especially the old asphalt ones that we want them to be concrete because they last longer and they're nicer, they're better, but the cost is $90,000 a year. It must be the same as pavement management, right? It doesn't even touch the. So as we go through the budget process, as these numbers kind of refine themselves, so for example, if we say no to the parkade, but the capital budget number, the end number is what council is set on, then where does that $350,000 go? Does council want it to go to pavement, sidewalks, something else? So that's the tricky part.
Mhm.
But I'm glad you asked that question. It's good to engage the public with that. Other questions?
Okay. Town master plan study, 80,000. Truck for engineering, 37,000.
Can I ask a question on that one? So this is going to replace the Kia Rio, is it?
That's what we're proposing, yes.
Can I ask two questions? Why does it need to be a truck? And have we worked on redrafting the way we go to vehicle tenders where we recognize the life, the cost, the entire cost of a vehicle over the course of its life versus the purchase price, right? So right now our tenders are set up, lowest price generally wins. But if you buy an electric car, it's never going to win based on its lowest purchase price, but over the lifespan of that vehicle, it will always be cheaper than a gas vehicle. So I'm just wondering, it's a long way to say, why does it need to be a truck? And how are we going to ensure that we are looking at a full range of vehicles and not limiting ourselves?
So with regards to a truck, we are actually, because of the nature of the work that we're doing now, especially around wastewater, we're actually using our new car more like a truck in a wastewater environment. So perhaps a truck might be better suited to give that separation and I guess put that type of equipment in the box versus in the cab of the car. So we're looking to replace this car. We're going to repurpose or make our car more usable to other departments and such. That I guess is more suited for car use versus a truck.
So,
So you're basically saying you need the truck for work purposes as opposed to transporting people.
Correct.
Yeah.
and it has to be a pickup truck,
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing. Okay, that answers that question. We do need to work on policy changes,
Mhm.
I think that.
Our criteria?
Criteria.
Yeah, for evaluating.
It wouldn't work on a pickup truck, there's no electric pickup trucks out yet, but when we start buying cars and other vehicles, we should be looking at a suite of options.
Okay. So I think we were ending at the water tower of 415,000. Wastewater treatment plant conditional assessment, 120,000. Wastewater treatment plant digester building ventilation, 30,000. Wastewater treatment plant pump station number 11 design and replacement, 3.5 million. Wastewater treatment plant repair, replace boiler, 400,000. Wastewater pump replacement program for the wastewater treatment plant, 25,000. A zero-turn mower for 16,000. Pearl Street paving, 225,000. King Street culvert replacement at 208,000. And that's the end of the list. And so that total for 21-22 is 13,658,762.
So the King Street culvert one's not on our list.
It's not showing on your list?
No.
It might, no, it should be there.
No, our last one is Pearl Street, and then it goes to 2022, 23, unless someone
Yeah.
else has it.
Pearl Street paving's the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. That one should be there, and we changed the year because that one became a change in year, I think, Larry, on that one, correct? That one was 2 years out, and it's needed to be moved back to the 21-22 fiscal year. So it might be showing
Oh, okay.
2 years out on yours. But
How much
should have
was it
been there
again?
because I think I printed mine. I thought I printed mine from the
How much was it? 200 and?
208 is the one that was 180 and changed to 208. So it had increased from the estimated value based on additional details or more recent details that engineering had.
Just on the Pearl Street paving, how much of that street is are we only paving the unpaved parts?
Yes,
And that's an estimate of 225,000?
yes.
Really?
There'd be a little bit of allowance, like for gravel and grading
Oh, okay.
and things like that as well.
Okay.
Is it cheaper because it's just already unpaved?
Yeah, it's basically grading,
Right.
adding 2 inches of gravel and then paving.
Is that where you're going? Why does it seem so low?
Okay.
What about the water and sewer for that street? Does it make sense to go and pave it and then come back and tear it up, put water and sewer in, or are we doing that too?
That, we had a presented council with a report that outlined the capital cost for that, and that was, remember,
To bring all of Pearl Street up to current standard was over $4 million.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's water, sewer,
Yeah.
storm.
So the direction at the last meeting was to put in the budget just the funds for paving.
Paving?
Yeah, given that all your other capital obligations that you have, it just wouldn't fit.
But you could feed that off of Victoria Road rather than going up over the hill and pumping stations and whatnot. And it would work, because you have your sewer and water right there. As a matter of fact, I think water's going in there so far on Pearl Street.
Water does, yeah,
Yeah,
and sewer.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Are there any questions on what's, this is our kind of our first look at this, so this is going to be, refined and we're going to go through this some more.
Yeah, I mean, some of the feedback we got earlier that I think might be pretty obvious is the North Parkade.
Yeah.
And that, especially with the decking piece at 350, the question's still out there about the railing, the cedar railing and the electrical, whether or not, that was 110, I believe, whether or not that's something that we want to proceed with or not.
It's a struggle for me to beautify the parkade while also saying we're not yet interested in
The deck.
the deck, right? It's, what's the expression, lipstick on a pig kind of thing. It's just, the electrical was important a few years ago when we were struggling with festivals and events, and I would argue that in 2021, July, we're not going to be quite yet having a large festival. Like, I think we've bought a year to deal with the electrical and the fencing after or the railing, till after we have the parking study. That's just my my 2 cents. But if we say there's no value in putting $350,000 in the decking, then how do you say there's value to put $10,000 in the rest? Deputy Mayor?
So Larry, with so many carry forward projects, is it still reasonable to expect you'll complete the others in the list?
The others for next year?
Yeah.
A lot of the carry forwards are actually in progress. It's a
Okay.
matter of, whether
Timing.
timing, whether the materials will arrive by March, things like that.
Okay.
Questions?
Not a question, just a comment. We've then, by those two projects, committed $625,000 to paving, the 225 plus the 400, and I think we always put a couple $100,000 in on the operational side for paving as well, don't we?
Yeah.
Believe so, yes.
Yeah.
So if we do that this year, we'll be $825,000, which is a pretty good dollar.
If that's where council wants to net out, yeah.
Yeah.
The wastewater challenges are just astronomical. It's,
Is there any funding there for that wastewater, or is that just without zero funding from
So there is
anybody?
There is some funding for this year's wastewater that's shown in your budget sheet.
but this budget makes no assumptions for any additional money other than money we are already,
Yeah.
Receiving? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so your capital, like for the future years out, we don't have anything built in when we look at our debt service ratios, but I believe this year we have some of the Invest in Canada infrastructure program funding that we applied for, I think, 2 years ago, applying to Pump Station 11.
Yeah, that's $1,584,000 in government funding on a $7.1 million three-year project.
Yeah.
Probably.
And
Something
when
like
they
that.
announce the next round, they may have announced it in
Last
their
year.
political announcements, but we haven't seen the actual, you may submit an application now announcement. So we're still sitting and waiting for that. And as soon as they open up, we'll get right in there.
so that is another challenge, just for the public that are watching, that staff face, is that there are political announcements at various levels of government saying, we've unleashed all this money. And then staff go, okay, where's the intake? Who do we go to? And there are no active pots of money. So great that you say there's $1 billion for wastewater, but there's no actual form to fill out, site to go to, person to contact. I'm assuming yet,
Yeah.
but it's a challenge, because I know I get those calls. Oh, this is great, you just, federal government, provincial government just announced all this money. No. Or what we heard earlier in the pandemic in wave one was municipalities now have access to all this infrastructure funding. Well, all they did was take the infrastructure funding that was already approved over the next number of years, push it to now, meaning there is no future funding for these projects. So it's no new money, zero new dollars. So it's a back and forth, it's a negotiation, and it hopefully will change. But I think it's important for the public to know, just because something is announced doesn't mean it's there or we have it. And there's a $150 billion infrastructure deficit for municipalities in Canada. So it's not just Bridgewater. I was talking about in our morning staff meeting, we talk about how we have old infrastructure. A 138-year-old pipe broke in downtown Montreal, flooding their downtown. 138 years old. So when our 100-year-old pipe broke a number of years ago, that was young compared to some municipalities. And all kidding aside, this is Bridgewater, Halifax, Truro, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and every single town in between facing all these challenges. So, Councilor McDonald.
There's a future item 2223 for the Centennial Trail Bridge. It's stairs and a ramp to address accessibility concerns, and it's marked as 100% grant funded. Why would that be in 2223? Is it capacity or when funds are available? Or maybe trying to coordinate it with when we have more guidelines?
And it's in the 22, 23?
It's about halfway down that same page as the last few
page.
items for 21, 22.
Yeah, it does say 100% grant funded.
Yeah. And 2022, 23, it's
I think, yeah, I think, Kim, the difference with the previous one, I think you were looking at the 21, 22 column later on, but the council was looking at the 10-year.
Oh,
And that
okay.
was the King Street culvert difference.
Okay.
But for that particular project, it is, I guess, an accessibility. It was brought up, I guess, during active transportation as well, for the, I guess, access on the west side of King Street
Okay.
would be a better access, if it could be a barrier-free access. And the idea is that we'd be looking for 100% funding in order to have the project move ahead. And I don't believe we're aware of any projects that would fit in that, I guess, this coming year. So I think it was anticipated that it would be a future project that we'd be applying for to try to
Okay.
accomplish.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Colwell.
I'm wondering about the carry forward item. I believe it is town-owned decorative lights on King Street. So it's $300,000 budgeted. I'm just wondering the rationale for doing that all at once as opposed to as needed.
So,
I think that one, if you look at we'll have the report later, but I think that one's anticipated to be about $200,000 in by March 31st. Like,
Right, okay.
if you drive along King Street, you'll see the progress on those. So that's the total cost of the project, not just the piece we're carrying forward at this point. And we won't know, we'll be able to bring those values to you after March 31st, because we're just estimating what that.
so council had that debate when in last year's budget, when we talked about purchasing decorative streetlights, and they considered the option of just replacing, certain ones as opposed to them all. There was concern over consistency in style, and so the decision was made that to ensure that, we would purchase them all at once. I believe they've been ordered, and
They're here, and
They're
we're
here.
putting
It's just-
them up as we have time.
just installation, and that's what's remaining to be done.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and
Yeah.
as the CAO said, we were worried that if we only ordered half, and then when we needed the other half, they said we don't have this style anymore, then we look.
There's banner sizes and all kinds of things,
It's a good question. Other questions? So, as I said, this is our first go-round. I don't hear any, other than the parkade, which, our motion was not to proceed with, it was just to proceed with the parking study, not to even push out the other item to next year. So nobody's stood up and fought to keep that in. So I'm not hearing anything from council yet on any position on any items. So, Councillor Frazier.
Just had a question, just looking at here, crosswalk improvement, and I know last year we had in there, with regards to the school, we took it out of the budget and waited to see if we got any updated info from the school side of things, and I'm just wondering if anybody's heard, or are we?
No, the last discussion we had
Okay.
with Mr. Ash was that they were going to discuss it, but he requested that we remove it from the budget for now. And so we will follow up again. We're about due for a conversation with him as well, just for some updates. I know that's been a
Ongoing. Yeah.
ongoing issue in front of the school. I was speaking to one of my colleagues, my mayoral colleague in Port Hawkesbury. So they just put down some temporary speed bumps that they pull up in the winter to prepare for snow plowing, that they found great success with. So they're just rubber and they bolt down, and snow plowing season they pop them out. So they found some success with that. So there's a whole bunch of options. Because I am hearing also the flip side of that from Halifax is they're finding some crosswalks are leading to an increase in accidents because of this false sense of security that it gives you with them. You push the button and you walk, making the assumption that pushing the button makes the car stop. So it's working with the school board to find out what is going to be working best. So hopefully we'll get back to you with some information. Anything else from council on that? Okay, so we do have capital pre-approvals.
There's a few more slides,
We're not there
actually.
Oh, you're not done yet?
No.
Still have
Nice
more
try.
track. Okay, so just wanted to go through how we're proposing to fund the capital budget items for 21-22. So I think that when you guys are looking at the PDF of the master, behind, like if you scroll a few pages in, you'll actually see in the top right-hand corner, it says master, but then it'll be each fiscal year on its own. And those fiscal years then show the funding for those. So when we're looking at that few pages specific to 21-22 in the funding, you'll see the proposed funding. So the carry forward amounts, capital from operating, I broke it down into three pieces. The carry forward amounts that are coming through that were funded in the current fiscal year we're in is $575,000. So that funding of those items will move forward. Of the regular 21-22 items, just over 1.2 million would be funded from capital from operating, and then the police vehicle lease buyout of 16,500 would come from their operating budget. In addition to that, we have grant revenue of 3,194,000. That could be smart cities and other grant funding sources. The gas tax of 1,395,000, debt financing of 6.3 million. We would use funds in the capital reserve of 274,000 and operating reserve funds of 640,000.
One thing I would point out is if you're looking at taking things out of the budget, for instance, in North Parkade, 350,000, that is proposed to be debt financed, right? So if you don't do that project, you can look at reducing the amount of borrowing you do as well. So that's why it's important to understand the sources of funding as well, because you might want to think you're reducing your budget, but it could be funded by grants. So it's not reducing the overall impact to your budget, right? So.
Okay. And like I like to always talk to you about the debt service ratio. We talked about this several times, but just at the very bottom of the page, the one number that's highlighted in yellow is 15.09. So in 2026-27 is when our debt service ratio would hit the 15%. We can still borrow after that, but the province won't be as happy with us, and under 15% is generally where a municipal unit should aim. So that's where we kind of meet that 15% marker. But the yellow line that's highlighted above that, I also wanted to bring to your attention, is where in 23-24 we start encountering deficits because we need to start paying back the principal and interest payments on the debt we're acquiring in 21-22 and 22-23 for these large capital budgets. And so all of a sudden our repayments, even though we're under the 15%, until 26-27, we're going to start the repayment and the cost of that much earlier. So I just wanted to highlight those considerations for you as well as you think about the capital budget. Capital reserve budget. We don't do a formal capital reserve budget. However, if you look at the 10 years of detail, we show you that there are some items and some projects that are partially or fully funded from the capital reserve. We don't have a capital reserve policy that, I guess, requires us to kind of maintain a minimum balance. And so if we go back to our FCIs, because we don't have a whole lot of other guidance on that, one of the FCIs says that our combined reserves are considered low risk if we have a total balance greater than 40% of our operating expenditures plus amortization. So on our last FCIs, which were as of March 31st, 2019, we were at 33.8%. So we were near the low risk, but not quite there. But the other thing to note is that our capital reserve only makes up 11% of that 33% balance. So our capital reserve is small in proportion to our operating reserve. And we're not quite in the low risk range as far as our total reserve balance. We don't, while we do budget for some transfers to reserves, we actually don't have a policy or do a regular transfer to the capital reserve as part of our budgeting exercise. And the other piece that I wanted to show you was a projection, not only of the 10-year capital budget, but how that's affecting our capital reserve balance. So if we look at the balance as of March 31st, 2020, so the very beginning of this fiscal period, that we're in right now, we have $2.1 million in our capital reserve. If we take into account the proposed 10-year capital budget, by the end of year 10, we're down to $1.7 million. So without having a specific policy or plan around a capital reserve fund balance and using it to fund some of our capital projects that don't have other funding sources, we're actually not maintaining that capital reserve balance. It will be depleted by the end of year 10. So again, just for your information so that you understand where we're going with that, because for a number of reasons it negatively affects our FCIs. So that's a consideration, but also that we will probably be bringing to you a capital reserve policy and a bit of a goal for where we go with that. But this is the impact of the capital budget on our capital reserve. So we just have a few next steps. One is approval of the pre-budget items. So those are things in the 21-22 budget. However, in order for staff to achieve success with those projects and get those carried out, sometimes they need pre-approval so they can start the procurement process. So we have a few items on that list. Approval of the capital carry forwards that were at the beginning of the budget, and then direction from council on the 21-22 capital budget, and any recommended changes.
And so to clarify, we're not necessarily looking for approval of the capital budget tonight, just any direction, anything you want to have us consider, bring back, that type of thing. But as Kim said, there's two items in particular that we're looking for approval for, so we can finalize the carry forwards and start work on those items that we need to prior to budget approval.
So, Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick question. How do you view the capital reserve? Do you view it as a emergency fund that we can go to if we get into trouble somewhere, or?
Yeah, I think that, sometimes we borrow from it when we don't want to go to MFC to borrow.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll lend ourselves some money from the capital reserve. But, it's partially that and partially, that rainy day fund of, oh my gosh, we have an emergency repair.
Yeah.
It's not in our budget. How are we going to fund that? Then that reserve is there to.
I guess part of me views it as we have a wastewater emergency, and why wouldn't we be drawing that down extensively, more so than maybe we're doing, or projected to do in the next 10 years?
I would say that if you look at your debt service capacity, if you deplete your reserves
Sure.
down to, say, less than that borrowing, you're still going to hit that window of your debt service ratio of 15%, because the $2 million really doesn't make that much of a difference over the 4 or 5 years. So you wouldn't have a reserve to go to for a rainy day, and you'd be borrowing for an emergency in that case, right? So
Yeah. Okay,
reserves
yeah,
are
okay.
meant
Raise.
kind of to deal with, well, one, some municipal units actually use them to offset the need to borrow.
Right.
So you just save money for a project, and then you lessen the amount that you have to borrow to do that. Others look at it as more of a safety net for those situations where you may not have the capacity to borrow, there might not be time to borrow, because MFs, you could do short-term borrowings, I guess, but you still have to have the capacity to do that, so.
And there is a bit of, earmarked projects in there, but there tend to be smaller values if you look at that. And the rest of the balance, gas tax reserve is part of our capital reserve, but really that's just a delay in, from the time we get it to the time we use it, why that's accumulated a bit of a balance. But the only other, so some things have to go in the capital reserve. So if we sell a piece of land or we sell an asset, we are required to put the proceeds of that in our capital reserve fund. So right now, that's, for the most part, all that's going in there are those things that the province requires us to put in the capital reserve.
Yeah.
but they don't go in with a specific use, they just become part of kind of an
The capital
undesignated
reserve,
balance.
Mm. And
So, so the province requires us to put it in, but at any point, we can pull it out.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
capital.
But you are
For
You
measured,
can't
your
use it for operating,
financial,
just capital.
your financial strength is measured by the
Yeah.
capital reserve you
Sure,
have,
sure.
right?
Okay.
You do
Yeah,
wanna-
we're only at 11%, which is,
Yeah, okay.
Do we want to talk about the uselessness of the financial indicators in the province? And
That's maybe where I was going.
but it does give us a baseline of expectation from the province,
Fair enough.
for lack of any other baseline on reserves, effectively.
It's funny, I'm thinking of the same thing you are in terms of wastewater, but coming from a different angle I feel the need for security to build up those reserves, because we're not going to have all our wastewater issues finished in the next 5 or 6 years. And so that cushion of being able to have money, so when something breaks, we're going to be dealing with that tonight, something broke and we need to now repair it quickly, to be able to have that reserve for when something in the many millions potentially breaks. So it's still for wastewater, but I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
you know, we have this replacement schedule for all this stuff, and what happens when somebody doesn't agree with our schedule, and we have $1 million
Fire
problem.
truck.
And it's the same, I'm
Fire
gonna have the
truck,
same
yeah.
discussion at the police commission. There's,
Yeah.
you know, the need for those reserves at some point.
Yeah.
You know, it's public knowledge, we lease that police station. Well, that lease sometime will end, and then when it ends, what do we do, right? So if you need to move, or you need to build, or you need to do something else,
Have some flexibility.
it gives you, the reserves give you that option. Or heaven forbid, there's a major issue that needs to be dealt with. Looking at the items, the carry forward is carry forward. It's projects that are already underway. So looking at the 21-22, we've heard from Councillor Caldwell and myself, and I think Councillor Thorburn as well, in terms of pavement management and sidewalks, and trying to put more money into that. But to the CAO's point, if you take it from one, it doesn't necessarily mean you're offsetting it from the other, right? So if we don't do the North Parkade project this year, if that was from borrowing,
Mhm.
then you're not actually,
You're borrowing for pavement management.
yeah,
if
if
you
you
don't have
borrow for
that.
pavement management, you're not actually reducing the budget by $350,000. So it's hard when staff presents you a already lean capital budget. There are no vanity projects in this capital budget. If you can find one, can you point it out so we can discuss it? Well, let's start with the easy. Nothing's easy, but is there anything that sits in that budget for 21-22 that council is saying there's no need for that to be in the budget? Or questioning why it's in the budget? While staff are here and can answer. Councillor Cole.
This is not necessarily, it shouldn't be there, but I am wondering about the roof repair at the arena, when we haven't formally decided what's happening long-term with the arena. So what's the rationale there? Just has to be
Well,
done?
I believe staff have kind of a plan for incremental improvements at the facility. We will be coming to you next week at discussion session to talk about the Bridgewater Memorial Arena and give you that refresher on the feasibility study about having it as a community type use mixed with parks and transit, and then get some direction. So that one, just you might want to just put a little mark beside that one, that depending on what direction you give us next week during discussion session, that will influence what that number looks like, which is why we're not necessarily saying let's approve the capital budget tonight, because we know that there are a few of those things that are kind of hanging out there until we have some discussions.
So hang on to that question for next council meeting, because if your question isn't answered next week, then it may be a suggestion that comes out. I don't
I'll
know.
look forward to that. yeah.
So hang on to that. Don't just write it down so you don't forget. I'll forget. So
In the
you don't.
vault.
Deputy Mayor.
So just on the parkade, we are or are not sliding that a year?
The 350?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to get,
really up to council. You said do the parking study next year, so where there's an assumption that we're making that it's coming out of next year's, the
Okay.
350 is coming out of next year's budget, which would reduce the amount that you're borrowing.
okay.
So I think council had agreed that there was no sense doing it until the parking study was done. So parking study's not being done until next year.
And that included the railings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 350 and 110.
Yeah, are we
Yeah.
all,
And any regular
Yes.
maintenance would come out of the operating, right? For the
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So are we all, I think we're all in agreement with that, so
Yeah. So
those
that
two
we'll
will
talk
come
about
out.
it.
The bulk of this is I mean, it's mandatory. Like you can't, there's either safety issues with not doing it, there's environmental issues with not doing it, there's costs, higher costs for not doing it. Councilor
For my
McDonald?
own knowledge question for Larry, do we replace a lot of doors at the Public Works Garage?
It's an annual thing.
One word answer, yes.
We haven't yet. It's a new program. We've had them, they're, I guess, a continuous maintenance item. We do spend quite a bit of money each year on them. And we had them assessed, and they are recommending to begin a replacement program. It's not to say that we have to start next year, but it is certainly something on the radar that we should be looking at doing soon.
Do you know if the province came back and paved the other half of Pearl Street? I don't mean half this way. They paved one direction and then they stopped for a while. And
One
so-
lane?
Yeah.
One lane.
Yeah.
Outside of town.
Yeah, outside of town. So like they paved driving towards town, but they didn't pave driving outside of town. And I'm asking because if they
Yeah,
On the Wild Hills.
if they haven't finished and they're coming back to finish, is there an opportunity to call the province and go, listen, while you're coming, just
Keep going.
keep coming and do, like, the truck's there, and maybe there's an opportunity to save on that?
You could pay them to do it.
yeah, that'd be nice. I think they did come and finish though, so I'm not sure. they'll
Oh,
come
did
back.
they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. It would be silly if, like, 8 months later, it's only half done, but,
Well, make it one way, then you only have to have paved one side of it.
I like your logic. It might be a little flawed, but I like it. Just the middle part.
Just the middle part.
Anything else that Councilor Caldwell?
This is my first year on council. I'm not familiar with this. Maybe somebody could explain it. So the energy management program, it's over $700,000.
Yeah, so that's over a number of years, that it's $700,000. We budget a certain amount each year,
Oh.
and that, I think we might have done the contract just at the beginning of council's term with Efficiency One
Mhm.
for an energy management program where we have a staff that's cost shared, and that person looks at energy improvements within our facilities to help a long-term goal of reduce our energy cost. So that's
700,000.
money to do that.
The 700,000 is not for this.
No, it's
No.
164,500, so if we just slide over.
Sorry, yeah, I was looking at the wrong.
Yeah, and we do have a 6-month check-in period with this contract, so it's coming up soon, where we specifically said we wanted projects identified, tangible projects identified, so that we could ensure that we're paying someone to do this work, that we're actually identifying projects that are able to be implemented. So normally it's an amount that's allotted, so those projects can be identified throughout the year. We hope to have that list that we'll be able to evaluate whether or not the project's working out for us, the overall program.
These are, I assume, initiatives that we would save money on costs going forward.
That's the idea, yeah.
Just to add to that, the numbers in the budget are based on estimated cost savings based on projects within the energy management plan. So they're not random projects, and it's based on that. So reinvesting in savings based on emissions.
Okay.
Other items? So as you review this, ask questions, bring this, we're going to deal with this again at the next council meeting in a couple of weeks. Okay, so as CAO said, we're not approving this tonight, so if something pops out, or if there's something that's missing, not that we want to add anything else, but if there's something that's missing, then, and it's, vital that it gets done, then we should find a way to make sure it gets done and try our best to offset that from somewhere else, but it's a lot, and I know it's still confusing. So this is year 13 for me, and I still do the same as you did, Councilor Collin. I'm like, no, I'm in the wrong column. Or last year, I remember going through this, and I was just going through and trying to figure out why we weren't talking about these items that were the following year. So, yeah, it's a lot. Are there any other questions on this? Okay, now we have to deal with the capital pre-approvals.
And there is a report, 10.21, that would help explain one of the capital pre-approvals.
So is
That's Audrey.
Audrey's here. Yeah, so staff will explain
That's the pump
Pump
station.
Station 3 emergency repair funding.
All right, so I'll give you the short story. In December, we had an emergency break at Pump Station 3, and for those of you that remember, Pump Station 3 and 4 are our most critical stations. They're both situated along the river's edge, and they're basically the major flow for both sides of the river. So Pump Station 3 started with a piping failure within the station that happened very quickly Sunday morning. It led to a valve failure that prevented us from being able to stop the station from flowing, and we ended up having to shut down Pump Station 4 and 3 in order to get control over the station and stop the water from going throughout the building, outside the building, and also damaging our electrical and SCADA through that episode. So given the 30-year age of the station and the condition of the piping inside the station, which we know has been deteriorating, staff feel this is a significant failure and it probably won't stop at this. So we are coming to you tonight looking for an emergency pre-approval of the 2021-22 capital budget for $180,000. This will only address the immediate failure location. So there is two sides to that pump station. This will be the section that failed, the dry side around the pumps and the electrical equipment, and will buy us time in the station, but we are looking at trying to fund the other side in future budgets. And any questions?
Questions from staff? Unfortunate, but these things happen. I do want to thank staff for quickly addressing this. I mean, I know teams were right on it and redirected and did everything they could to minimize the impact on the environment. So, and I do know that when these things happen, it is as upsetting to staff as it is to the public. Nobody wants to put anything in the river. So, I just want to make that clear that I know staff get really upset when this happens. Any questions for Audrey while she's here? You look like you have a question.
Well, somewhat. Audrey, is there any benefit of spending going right to option 3? Like, is there a cost savings there versus like doing it all at once versus in 2 phases?
There might be a bit of a cost savings, but it would mean a longer outage for the station, which would be more challenging in pumping, because we'll have to bypass pump during this whole event, so it would be a lot more challenging a repair. So to do it in 2 phases is probably reasonable to get it done quickly.
Okay.
Other questions on that one? Okay, we've got a couple other items in the pre-approval list. We've got the wastewater treatment plant boiler replacement and the King Street culvert replacement. Any questions on those? Deputy Mayor? Are you sure?
100%.
Okay. Is someone prepared? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just not sure I understand, for King Street culvert replacement, I'm not sure what it means by business park changes may impact ultimate size design.
Mr. Feener?
So, I guess with the works that was happening in the business park, with the intersection changes, getting ready for the interchange, some master planning for the lands north of the 103, there was a thought that it may affect the flows within this drainage course. So we were, I guess, hoping that we'd be farther along in the process just to make sure that nothing would change that might affect the sizing of the replacement of this culvert. And I think we're pretty confident that it's not. We have had a couple of failures recently in the last couple of months, although not significant, certainly to the point where it concerns staff. So we'd like to replace it before it becomes more serious. It has been in the budget a couple of years, and we've been monitoring, and we've been, I guess, postponing, but we are at the point where it should be replaced.
Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Thorburn?
I would move that council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and pre-approve the capital project outlined in document 21-012 in the total amount of $788,000. $180,000 pump station 3 emergency repairs, $400,000 wastewater treatment plant boiler replacement, and $208,000 King Street culvert replacement.
Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is capital carry forwards. We've really already
You've been presented
talked
with
about
the
those,
items,
so,
yeah.
Okay. So as I said, we're in budget season now, so we're looking at capital. So go through it again, fine-tooth comb, ask your questions. I would encourage the public to contact any one of us if you have questions. We regularly hear from members of the public. That's how Pearl Street got added here. That's how some other items have arrived on the budget, and it's also how items get deleted from the budget. So I would encourage the public to reach out to council. Our challenges are not small, but we're not alone. We're facing them like every other community. So we'll do our best to continue to be fiscally responsible as we have often.
So the motion actually is not showing an e-scribe for that,
For the capital.
for the capital
Capital carry
carry forwards, but if you go to the staff report, it's there. So if council's amenable to carrying forward those capital projects, there's two motions. One is to approve the carry forward of the capital projects to the 21-22 budget as outlined, and approve the transfer to reserve of the actual unspent capital from operating funds on March 31st, 2021, which is estimated at $575,000 to be transferred into the 2021 budget to fund the capital carry forward projects as noted in Schedule A. So you included in your tax rate some funding of the capital budget from operating. So what we're telling you is of those capital carry forwards, $575 is funded through the tax rate that should be put into a reserve and carried forward to fund next year, instead of allowing that to go to surplus.
And North Arcade is in that carry forward list,
The 110.
railing and electrical, so pending removal of that from the list.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that number will change.
Was that funded from, but it's okay.
$85,000 from operating.
It's okay, because the motion says estimated at, so it'd be the actual unspent, so we'd actually have to amend that to add to number one, that if you don't want the North Parkade railing in there, that it'd be to approve the capital projects excluding the North Parkade railing.
So then are you at 365.
Well, I think it's okay to leave the motion
465?
as is, because it says unspent capital from operating estimated at 575, so, you could subtract it or just leave it.
Are there any questions before I call for the motion on that? So there. I give a question. So the motion is to approve, the motion will be to approve the carry forward 2020-2021 capital project budgets to the 2021-22 budget as outlined in the report,
Accepting the North Parkade.
accepting the North Parkade, and approve the transfer to reserve the actual unspent capital from operating funds on March 31st, 2021, estimated to be less than $575,000 to be transferred to the 2021-22 budget to fund the capital carry forward projects as noted in Schedule A of the staff report.
You should be able to refresh. It should be on your screen.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Because I was buying the time. Deputy Mayor, you had a question?
What's the Vino Bridge design?
That was the one you had asked for.
The Wildsbrook? Okay.
So we call it two different names.
Okay, that's cool. No, just thought we were talking two bridges. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got two motions in your package now. If you refresh, is someone prepared to make the first motion? Councilor Vergier?
Yes, Your Worship. I move that council for the town of Bridgewater approve the carry forward of 2021 capital project budgets to 2021-22 as outlined in document 21007, accepting the North Parkade.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Caldwell. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And someone prepared to make the next motion? Councilor McDonald?
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the transfer of reserve, the actual unspent capital from operating funds on March 31st, 2021, estimated at $575,000 to be transferred into the 2021-2022 budget to fund the capital carry forward projects as noted in Schedule A of document 20-007.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Thorburn. 2021-22 is easier to say than it was when it was 2020-2021, which just was a whole bunch of 20s in a row.
It's getting
so
easier.
It is getting easier. I blame COVID. Any discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you to staff, especially finance staff and their team to put all this together, and senior management and your teams. We will continue our in-camera agenda following this. Kind of a motion to adjourn, please.
So
Councilor
moved.
Thorburn, seconded by Councilor Vergier. We are adjourned. Thank you.